was mixed up.
No.
And did you notice that?
But he made the mayor look good in this one.
Yeah, I said, I don't remember him saying that. Or maybe he did somewhere in all of it.
He said it at the end in summary.
Yeah.
The last paragraph was a recycle from about 2 months ago.
Yeah,
I've seen out of that.
yeah.
Well, it's Donald Trump. You gotta watch what you say, keep him coming back to haunt you. Actually, it doesn't haunt him at all.
No.
He doesn't care. He likes haunting.
He's terrified, so. What page is this?
We'll start on 26, Joe. 26.
Okay.
Is that right, Jeff?
Yep.
Uh-huh. Next possible meeting date.
Is Elia here today? Does anybody know?
Yeah, I think he said he can make it. Yep.
Maybe I think I'm moving, so I don't encroach on him with my stuff.
We're still got to Where are all these chairs over there?
All right, good morning, everyone. Go ahead and get started with our third budget meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. Hopefully this is the last push here. We'll be starting in what we call our enterprise operations, our water, sewer, and storm operations. I think it's page 26 on your particular hard copy. And this will essentially be the Alex and Jim show. I think you all know Jim Widener from our utility operation.
Can I request something regarding the previous days before we get started on new material? I would like to request on whatever the line item the town hall expansion is. As part of that, I'd like to request staff memo on the expected costs of having the town hall in the Superior Town Center, as close as we can predict at this particular juncture. After last week's meeting, I think we need to come out with detail on that. So if we could get that started as part of the budget process, I think that's good.
Hey, Sandy, I think that it needs to go further than that, though. I think there were some other properties that were brought up in that last meeting. For instance, the Rogers property, is it feasible, or what would it cost to put town hall there? And I think we should look at, just so residents know, what the cost would be if we put it at the corner of McCaslin and
Right.
Colton. I
That's
think that we need to look at
fine
all
with
those.
me, but we keep talking around this issue of the additional cost of putting it in the Superior Town Center. What is that exactly? So if we can put some numbers to that analysis, that's great. And if we add in Rogers Farm, that's fine with me too.
But just for clarification, we don't need that necessarily for the budget.
Well, I'd sort of like it in the context of this
Yep.
budget line item.
Well, we can have the information, but it can't be in the budget. I mean,
Yeah, you have a
No,
budgeted amount.
no.
I think that's
Yeah,
fine.
exactly.
So we go with the budgeted amount, but I agree
The
with Sandy
staff
that we
memo.
need to understand
Yeah.
the total
The
cost.
staff, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, any other questions or follow-ups before we get then into the utility operations? Okay, so we will begin briefly on revenues. I don't want to belabor what we've talked about in the two previous review sessions, but again, I think it's worth noting, and for any individuals who are watching or paying attention to this, we are looking on the water side at 2.5% rate increase in 2017, And the long-term financial planning is calling for an additional 2.5% in 18, followed by 0% increases through 21, and that is down from last year's planning budget of 5% annual rate increase. So just a note. The board will see, we're trying to differentiate between our base water service fees, those are the monthly service fees to customers on line 11 with existing customers, and then we try to identify as new customers come onto the system. Those are lines 12 and 13, just to give you a sense of what the new customer revenue is on the utility system for ads. And again, any new customers who come onto the system, there are very limited incremental operating expenses associated with those customers. Jim's plants are pretty much sized to handle growth within the particular system. We have some very slight variable costs below, but new customers, generally add net new revenues. As it relates to other operating revenues, no additional comments there, and same thing for miscellaneous. So unless you have any other questions on revenues for the water operating fund, we'll let Alex and Jim jump into the expenses. Mayor?
Irrigation service fees, just a quick explanation of what that item is.
That's our what we call our gray water system, or our non-potable water
That's
system.
the revenue we get from users of that?
Correct. And the primary payer of those particular fees is the town, either through the town or Class 1 landscape, but it's our additionally our commercial customers who pay for the irrigation system.
Okay. Are the schools on that?
They are. Not only the schools within town, but then we provide water to Monarch as well, and that's essentially under a separate agreement, a 1990s agreement between the district and between SMD and the school district. So yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Paul, what about don't we refill that reservoir by Bell Flatirons? Don't we put water there?
Yeah. We do occasionally through the FRICO ditch and charge them for that.
And
but
where is that on here? Or is
that would be under lease revenue, which is a capital revenue line item.
Okay.
But it's relatively insignificant. $2,000, maybe $50 an acre foot. But it's raw water supply that we have that we fill.
And the town pays for that, or do they reimburse us for that?
They reimburse us for that.
Okay.
Relatively insignificant, but essentially it's the annual our annual assessment fees we recover for what we deliver to them.
Yeah. At one point we had talked about with the previous board in our goal planning. I think Mayor Muckle had wanted to have a beach and be able to have residents enjoy that, and we talked about that reservoir that people could go there and enjoy that. Have we ever done anything to follow up on that to see if that's possible? If we're co-oping water there, isn't there a partnership that we could develop?
So Bell Flatirons, that's their lake or reservoir. It's not the town's, and they have been reluctant to allow anybody but their residents of the apartments to use that.
Okay.
It's not used that much, though. I don't think.
Okay, we'll hop then to expenditures administrative, or just some general ticky-tack. The most.
Excuse me, I
I'm
got
sorry.
a question. No, that's fine. The construction meter fee and construction water fee, is that because this is gray water or non-potable water that is so low after 2015?
So the construction meter fee, the first one you identified.
Well, not the meter, I really meant the construction water.
Construction water fee
Yeah.
is for lease of water, essentially out of our potable system, out of our fire hydrants. You'll actually see a meter sitting there in the atrium there, and it's for contractors who need that for their construction projects.
Well, because we were filling that pond over here in the Superior Town Center out of the fire hydrant and the potable water system. And where is that fee that they paid for that water? I don't see it in.
Construction water fee?
Yeah.
You'll see it there, and that spike, Jeff, if you please go back to 2015 actual, you'll see a big spike there. There was
$64,000.
correct. That was most of that was associated with water with the Superior Town Center earth moving work.
And so this year they haven't spent they haven't used water very much.
Well, they've used more than we've budgeted. I mean, we had budgeted 5,000, it's estimated at 20. Last time I looked at that 20 will probably be a little bit low. So,
Okay, and then next year, they're not going to use any more than that either.
you know, again, we try to be conservative as it relates to our estimates. That line is probably a little bit low. Yeah, there it will probably be higher than that.
Okay,
But
thank
not-
you.
not
I just was
materially.
looking for, because
Yeah.
I know a lot of water flowed into that pond.
64,000.
Yeah.
Before Alex gets into kind of the operating side, on admin, the biggest line item there is water conservation, and I wanted to remind the board and our residents that we have a pretty active water conservation program. Either about $15,000 of that $20,000 budget is for residential irrigation audits, and then the town has a program to replace old, toilets and shower heads, and we've expanded the program to include irrigation controllers, for example, this year. So that's usually a well-utilized program that we have. So Alex, under water supply,
Yeah, the key thing on this, and Paul covered it, is that our Windy Gap payment goes away next year, so we have our last payment this year. So we have $318,000 for that payment that is freed up for.
and this is, we have, part of our water rights are Windy Gap shares. Part of the Windy Gap shares, there was a debt component associated with that. The debt issued 20 years ago, and that essentially was paid off this year. So that helps dramatically in this account.
Okay. In the water supply, that fluctuates from year to year on the basis of the Windy Gap usage and their assessments and so forth. Paul, I don't know if you want to touch on the assessments from Northern in terms of those going up, aren't the?
So what Alex is referencing is we have two primary water shares, and you heard this from Paul Zilas a while back. They are our Windy Gap shares and our Colorado Big Thompson shares. And there are annual assessments associated with those, and those essentially are charged to us. They're operating costs associated with getting those water shares to us. The Northern Water District recently did a rate study a few years ago specific to the CBT assessments, line 54, and you'll see a pretty dramatic, kind of almost a 10% increase in that particular line as it relates to a result of that rate study. And they're essentially charging all their CBT holders. I mean, we have a little over 2,000 CBT shares out of a total portfolio of over 300,000. So pretty much all are being charged that new higher than inflation assessment. We keep an eye on that. We have dialogue with them on that, but that's the one kind of above inflationary anomaly we see here.
Okay, on water treatment, a couple of things I want to point out here. We are rebidding our contract for the operations of the water plant and the wastewater plant. So we've upped this a little bit more than the 3%. Again, we don't know where that's going to come in. We'll find out end of the year. And then wanted to point out here, solids hauling in 2016 went up because we did do quite a bit of solids hauling, and so we've upped the budget here for 2017 and going forward. As you see in later years of the capital budget, we look at solids handling facility, sludge drying beds at the water plant down the road to try to reduce that cost. Also on here, if you go, okay, that's all on supply. If you go up to storage, distribution. On repairs of potable lines, this number has been starting to take off. In 2015, we had a number of water breaks. This year, we're project 80,000, may even be low. We had a couple of other water breaks, so our system's starting to age, and we're starting to get a lot more water breaks. I just point out that this could be low going forward because we're starting to get to a point where things are breaking. So hopefully we don't have those in the future, but we never know when they're going to occur. The other thing I want to point out on the water meters, we've projected as residential areas start coming out, we buy the water meters, and then we get a revenue, so there's an offsetting revenue that offsets that. So even though that's going up, we're getting reimbursed by developers for that. Okay.
Hey, Alex, I did have a question about the sludge drying beds. So currently we have a contractor come in and dredge them, so all that liquid sludge, they take it and haul it away.
Right.
So is there a significant cost savings by us putting in drying beds? Because we still have to have somebody come and take that dried material
It's
away.
dry material, so we're
haul it away.
Right.
So,
well, you're hauling dry material versus wet material. So the hauling costs will be less. And we'll do a whole study to determine what the payback is for doing that. And Jim, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I see that it's not till 2018, so we usually discuss things that are happening next year, but still, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, this is Jim Widener. The thing with the sludge from the water treatment plant is it ends up in the sewer system sometimes, and we're getting mandated by the state to get that out of the wastewater system, and so we have to figure out a way to get the sludge out of the system quicker and more efficiently. And they're kind of doing it inadvertently by making us take it out at the water plant instead of making us take it out at the wastewater plant.
Okay, so this is also a reaction to a mandate.
This has some compliance issues involved with it.
Thank you.
Alex, anything else on water storage and distribution?
No.
And non-departmental, again, are expenses that we don't assign to some of those operating divisions. Again, the biggest component here is the debt service payment. And again, sounding like a broken record, but the board was able to refund that debt, resulting in material savings and ultimately resulting in getting these operations to be closer to self-sufficiency without a general fund transfer. So that's why you see the big expense decrease here. And again, this fund, Jeff, if you'll roll down to the bottom, the board has a reserve policy here to maintain between, and this is on line 128, between 75 and 100% of expenses in a reserve account. So we generally, that's the number obviously that we shoot for there. So that's the balancing factor in this particular budget. Okay, we'll jump over then to water capital. Again, very briefly on the revenues, Trustee Hansen, this is where, for example, we'll see on line 12 that water lease revenue where we, will occasionally lease our water to either Bell Flatirons or if we have excess portfolio. We participate in a program run by Northern, our water provider, where they will take our shares and other shares and auction them off, and we will get water lease revenue from that. Again, the big item to note here is on lines 10 and 11, what we call our system development fees. These are fees that we charge new users to the system who connect to the system, and you'll see some material revenues here. For example, in 17, $1.6 million, and similar amounts in out years, and that's essentially reflective of the growth that we're projecting that is financially beneficial to the system. On line 14, you'll see an offset. Alex will go into the Windy Gap firming project, but to fund that project, again, we are looking at, we've got about half the money in the bank. We'll need to get some sort of loan in all likelihood, or potentially use system development fee revenue to pay for the other $10 million for that particular project.
A question on the system development fees. Are they the same as the tap fees?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so when a new resident buys the house, they'll actually, the developer pays the tap fee and then to tap into the water system and have access to our water system, and then the new resident will actually pay for it in the price of the house.
It's embedded
But
in
it
the price
doesn't
of
come
the
back to
house.
us. I just want to make sure that, and then I'm just thinking out loud, I apologize for that. And then, and tap fees are big, you know. Many years ago, my tap fee was like $35,000, so it was a lot, or $13,000, I mean, it was a big chunk of money, or maybe it was 35, but it was a lot of money. We don't give that back at all to any of the developers, do we? We don't give them a break on the tap fees?
We do not.
Okay.
And again, typically the tap fee is paid when the building permit is pulled. So it's typically then the builder essentially is paying that tap fee.
Right, right. Thank you.
Capital expenditures, Alex?
Okay. The Windy Gap firming next year would be some of our share of our design costs in designing the facility up at Windy Gap, and then 18 is when we be paying our construction portion of that, and all will come back with financing options and other things. But we put it all in 18. It could spread out till 19. I'm not sure what the timing is on that. Some of the minor ones, Purple Park ditch improvements, what that is between ponds 4 and 5. We have water that's disappearing, going underground, and we're kind of scratching our heads what's going on there. And between Parks and Public Works, we're trying to figure out what to do. So we keep putting that one off, but we'll budget money next year to try to correct that.
We're not going to have sinkholes, are we?
Right, the sinkholes, we need to get in there and maybe line the ditch. Right now, we have rock boulders that are grouted, and there's holes in the grout that it's sinking.
It's in the ponds that are inside of Purple Park. You're talking about 4 and 5?
Right. Mm-hmm. There's 2 ponds, and there's a kind of a ditch that's lined with boulders and grouted between the 2, and water flows between them and then disappears.
And how do you know that?
It's probably going downhill.
Yeah, down underground. Know what's going on.
It was about couple hundred feet stretch that it disappears. You go there, where's the water? And then it comes out somewhere else.
Oh, because that's interesting. I know, okay. Well, there is an underground stream right along there. That's, truly.
One
So it's
asks
filled.
if it's ending up where it needs to be, do we need to spend $100,000 to
It
fix it?
doesn't, though. You're not
think
saying
you
that
need
it
to know
does.
where it's
You
going.
need
Well,
to
that's
know
why we
it's
haven't
going.
done it yet, but I mean, we think it's probably going to cause a problem, so we.
Okay.
wanna
Well,
get-
yeah, because a car will crush under in Rock Creek
I
Parkway, and then
got you.
you're
I
going to be
was,
worried.
I was
you know.
just being funny.
Yeah. The pond at the top, though, too, notoriously loses water,
Right up there.
and nobody knows where it goes to.
Goes to your sump.
Probably just.
It goes into, it actually goes between 2 houses. I know exactly where it goes. It's 25 feet under the ground. There's a stream. But that's interesting that pond's losing water, too. Thank you.
Next is a continuation of our reuse system upgrades, and this is actually to replace the pumps at the Mica pump station. Again, we have a master plan that we're trying to implement to provide some replacement for our current system to make it more efficient, and also provide capacity for the town center and other developments. Down below, we have a bunch of maintenance projects, water system control upgrades at the plant, irrigation valve installations. We have all these reuse lines, and there are places where they're a quarter mile, half a mile long without any valves. So if it springs a leak, it's hard to isolate that. So we've been trying to get additional valves in there. It's hard to do because the system is on most of the year, and you got to drain a line for a mile to get in there and to put a valve in. So we have a program over the several years to start adding valves. The water treatment chlorine concentration time, and Jim, can you help me explain that one?
The state's coming out with a program, what they call the DOVE, D-O-V-E. It's a disinfection outreach verification effort, they call it. And they're taking a look at is everybody disinfecting properly? They're going to all the water systems in the state. And part of that effort is to do a time of concentration study, how long your chlorine stays in the system and that sort of thing. And so that's where that money is. We're going to have that study done.
So we're doing that study, and then we anticipate maybe some improvements.
Maybe some improvements. We're not sure what's going to come out of it.
Next line item is fire hydrants. Seems like we always have one or two that needs replacing, so we budget funds for that. At the water treatment plant, we have some piping that's kind of raised off the floor. That's a trip hazard that we want to correct. In next line 38, we want to put some sonic solutions for algae control at Terminal Reservoir and at Pond 5 to increase the
Which is Pond 5?
Pond 5 is in Purple Park.
Oh, okay.
There's some algae that was brought up along the Rock Creek Circle where you just,
Yes.
are you working to do
That's not
something?
part of this,
Uh-huh.
but we have a program that we get with parks and look at those problems. And
Okay.
right now, I think we're doing some chemical treatment for that.
Okay.
But there were requests that we need aerators for that. But we'll work with parks.
I think one of them has an aerator, they said, but that came up last Friday at Sandy's
Yeah.
First
Couple
Friday
do and
meeting, that
couple
it's
don't.
kind of bad right now. I don't know if it's the
And I'll be
function
getting-
of the temperature
Right.
and the weather.
And in our storm drainage, I'll get into some of the detention pond issues. FRICO, this is the ditch that runs through town, and a long time ago when we developed Rock Creek, we piped the ditch as it came through town, and so there's issues with maintaining them, and they've actually done a study, they've examined the line, there's recommendations that they want us to do to maintain their pipe coming through town, so,
But that's right up here.
yeah, right behind your house there.
Right, along, underneath McCaslin, it goes right up here.
Mhm.
So we have to pay $60,000-$70,000 to fix something that doesn't belong to us?
Yes,
Because
because we took an open channel, when
Oh.
we put it in a pipe, and when we did that, we had an agreement that said we had to provide for the ongoing maintenance of that pipe.
So that buried ditch, we buried that ditch? Or did they bury the ditch all along the
We buried,
the buffer?
we buried as part of the development, the developer probably did.
Oh, no, it was buried after I moved here, so I don't know who paid for it, but I stood there and watched them as they buried it there, but,
Well, I mean, similar to an issue we're having behind Sagamore now, where the county has an open ditch and it's creating mosquito problems
Right.
and stuff like that, so.
well, I'm not
Yeah.
contradicting the idea of burying the ditch. I'm just trying to figure out why we have to pay for
'Cause-
something that they.
Yeah, we were the ones that wanted to bury it.
Okay.
FRICO doesn't care if it's an open ditch or not,
Mhm.
but for our residents, it's not a hazard, but I mean, it causes problems, so we
Okay.
buried it, yeah.
I mean, the 55,000 in 2019 is a pretty steep increase, it seems to me.
I think what it is, they
one time.
did an evaluation study, they went and inspected the ditch, and they had several improvements. Yeah, if you want to bring up.
Yeah,
Yeah, the 14,000 is a
Mike, Jim.
The 14,000 is a study that they're going to do
Oh.
to see what problems
okay.
we're going to anticipate. And the 55 is sort of a placeholder to make sure that we've got that money, in place.
What did it say? Where is it going from? 14,000 is going from McCaslin to where? From the McCaslin Headworks, it runs for President to its outlet. Is that going west then, that we're looking, or going
East.
Okay.
Yeah, right behind your house.
It's pretty deep as well.
It's pretty deep. That's exactly the one I said I watched them bury, you know? So.
So the 14,000
I'm still confused as to who buried it, and if it's a problem along that stretch, I don't know why we should have to pay for the study or the fix of it. I know it's out a few years, but I would just ask the question again.
I think we
We're paying
can-
for something that maybe was created by when they buried, whoever buried it, not necessarily that, I don't know. It just seems suspect to me. I just asked the question.
We can forward you the agreement that calls for us to maintain.
I just ask you to make sure that it fits within, for us to pay for something, to find out if it was buried incorrectly when we didn't bury it, but we may have asked to have it buried, just seems like a bad use of taxpayer dollars. The study, it's not even a fix, it's just to find out that there's a problem. Isn't that a commercial right now? Oh, you have termites, we'll fix it. No, I just find them. and
Well,
I don't fix
it
them.
is a policy issue whether or not we want mosquito infestation, so I'm looking forward to what you provide us.
I'll let you know.
I mean, it's possible that'll be less than 55,000. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
you're going to spend that money. It could be a lot less, maybe, right?
The 14,000 is not really a study, it's an inspection. They're going to inspect the pipeline, look for leaks, and see what needs to fix.
Okay.
Next up at the water treatment plant, we have filter media up there, and we have an ongoing program of replacing the filter media, the granular carbon activated on a periodic basis.
Are we interested in going line by each one of these things?
I can
Some
cook.
of these things, I depend on you guys to.
Right.
That's your
Right.
job, maintenance and replacement and all that kind of stuff, and I don't know if we need to go line by line.
Yeah, the last three, I mean, we just had the Clariflocculator rebuild replacement, minor costs there. Some costs for building maintenance. We have gutters and stuff that need to be upgraded. And then terminal reservoir maintenance, just side slopes where we have weeds growing up that we need to take care of. And I think that's about it.
The $500,000 in 2019 is a big budget item. I mean,
Is that what Chris asked about before? Right. Yeah.
that was in here.
These are our long-range, big-ticket items down the road that,
Okay.
we're anticipating. I mean, there's the sludge drying beds. We have the irrigation storage tank up above Rock Creek that has the cover on it. So that's been pretty old. We're anticipating replacing that. And then some water storage tank rehabilitation.
Okay.
So those are big-ticket items coming down the road.
So is that the only way to skin this cat, is by $500,000, doing it a certain way, or are there other techniques to do this?
Right, and we'll be looking at other
Again,
ways of doing
this
it.
is a placeholder.
Yes.
We haven't identified the specific approach,
Well,
or we have.
For sludge drying beds, we've kind of costed that out, but there are other approaches that we will be looking at.
Yeah, there's the sludge drying bed is the way that everybody does it usually. Louisville just built one at this plant right over here. They can be pretty monstrous, or they can be a little toned down. We're looking at a more toned down, maybe even just some asphalt drying beds, maybe even converting the one we have now into a drying bed and then adding another one so we can use one. And then, we're looking at several different.
How about looking at a cooperative relationship with Louisville? Can we
Send the
utilize
sludge.
their thing and just pay them for it?
Yeah, it depends on capacity. I don't know if
Yeah,
they've got the
I don't know,
capacity. Right.
but maybe we don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just another question off this topic. I think we all got the email from Mayor Spence about the fluoride, adding fluoride to the water, and that may not be necessary. This has come up before in the past. Is this something that we are looking at? Do we need to add fluoride? Is it?
I got a schedule for the next retreat as a discussion item as well.
I think just provide a quick answer, which is that we only fluoridated or put fluoridation in up to like a 1.0 level.
We
Is
take
that
it up
right?
to about 0.7.
Okay,
I have no
0.7,
idea what
which
that
is-
means,
Which
though,
is
as far
virtually
as-
nothing. Naturally occurring, it's like 0.4 or something.
It's 1 part per million.
Okay.
So 0.7 parts per million.
But
So like-
in reference to, does that make my kids' teeth stronger? I have no
I'd have
idea.
to ask
That's a
Dennis,
big
but-
debate.
Or is it
Okay.
more harmful to you than it is protecting your teeth?
Well, it naturally occurs at about 0.3. So we take it up to 0.7, because if you're going to add fluoride, the EPA says if you add it between 0.7 and 1, that's where it's most effective for any prevention of cavities that you want to have. Anything above that, say about 2 or 4, then you start actually causing damage. You can actually pit your teeth
Okay.
out if you get too much fluoride.
But do you, historically, have you added fluoride to water because of the certain composition of the water? So is our water in such good shape that maybe we don't need to do that because the minerals that are in the water are already protecting it?
And that's what I said. We have probably about a 0.3 milligram per liter parts per million of fluoride in the water occurring naturally. Sometimes it's lower, depending on the temperature.
The
and
public
so
health
forth.
implications of this are there.
Yeah.
I lived in a community that did not fluoridate its water, and when my kids were young, and it was a real concern to me to figure out how to get enough fluoride as recommended. So before we do anything with this fluoridation, I mean, it's really sort of a big deal, and it needs to be studied in
Yes.
terms of whether or not the community wants the public health implications of no additional fluoride. So I just want us to know what we're getting into when we challenge this fluoridation.
That's why it's on the next retreat, but I
Okay.
think that I wanted to have Jim tell you that it's so small, the amount of fluoridation that we add right now, so people shouldn't be concerned that we're going over
Overboard.
and it could be damaging. It's such a small amount that we're adding. So then that begs the question, why do we need to add it?
Right.
Which is why it's on the retreat.
But I agree with Sandy that before we just say, okay, well, let's just stop adding it, let's
Right.
understand what we're doing and what the potential consequences are of that.
Right.
And I think there's a whole body of science on the impact of the fluoridation in the, 20th century, et cetera, and adding it in terms of dental. So, I mean, somebody could Google that, I'm sure, and
Yeah.
find this out. But I agree, let's not overdo it. But having been down this road, I appreciate fluoridation in public water supply because it takes it off my back and,
The point for me was just to let everybody know that we're not putting so much into
Right.
it that you should be concerned.
Right.
And in the meantime, it's been there for quite a number of years. Previous boards reviewed this and all the study data and made a determination to add a small amount.
Right.
So now it's time to relook at it, rethink it, and see if we maintain the same policy or change it. And that's on the next retreat, which is in October? Matt?
Yes.
Okay.
If there are no more questions on the water operation, we'll just jump to sewer. Sewer operating, we do not have the luxury of, at this point, dropping rates, and we'll show you why to some degree on the sewer capital program, but we're looking at 5% increase next year, and the 5-year plan shows for an annual increase of 5% on those monthly sewer service charges. Again, line 12 represents the existing revenue, and line 13 represents revenue from new development in town, just to give you a flavor of that. And miscellaneous revenues are just that, just miscellaneous. And this fund, look at line 26, this fund, this operation still receives at times a material transfer from the general fund to help balance this particular operation. So it's not as close to financial self-sufficiency as our water operation or our storm drainage operation, but we're getting there. You can see some years we are looking at no transfers, but the spike years are associated with maintenance capital projects, but we'll get into that in a moment. Then as it relates to operating expenses, Jim and Alex, admin are just kind of basic expenses. We'll start with water collection, any material items there? Wastewater collection, excuse me.
Only comment again, here's the treatment plant operator, again, that's up for renewal at the end of the year. That's about it on operations.
Does that escalate, that contract, as we get more users, or?
No.
And it doesn't, it's a 5-year or a 3-year contract that we enter into? And
Right,
it's-
we rebid it every 4 years.
4 years, okay.
And then we have CPI escalator clauses
Okay.
after that.
Okay.
Go to CIP.
And then the same dialogue on non-departmental. This is where we'll see the savings for the debt refinancing. Most of that debt, though, I think we're estimating to save over $700,000 a year. Most of that debt is assigned to the water operation, over 90%. So that's where the huge savings are. And again, we this fund, like the water fund, has a reserve requirement that the board approved. That's line 109 of 75 to 100%. So that's generally our threshold, and you see that's where we look to balance this budget within that reserve requirement. On capital, again, the same dialogue as it relates to TAP fees or system development fees. Line 10, this is where you will see the positive fiscal impact of people connecting to the system. As it relates to expenses, and again, Alex, similar to water, just maybe focus on the big ones and we'll show them kind of some of the out-year expenses we're anticipating.
Yeah, if you can go over, I mean, these are all, minor projects that we are continuing to upgrade the plant. Big ticket item is we have a pond out there that's been fairly old, and we keep pushing this down, kicking the can down the road, but we probably need to replace the liner. So we're looking at design this year and construction next year. Then we have, again, filter media replacement, some process pump issues. So these are all projects that we're doing to keep the plant going. If you go over to 22, so our permit is up for renewal. They've been our wastewater discharge permit. And so we're going to get a compliance schedule this year that tells us probably by 2022 we have to upgrade our plant to meet the new requirements. And we have a master plan that kind of tells us what we need to do, and it's big ticket items, almost over $20 million in terms of upgrades. We're chipping away with Jim's been doing a great job trying to do this in a more economical fashion to use whatever latest technologies we can. So before we expend anything, we'll make sure that we're doing it in as cost-effective way as we can. But we have down the road, we have a big ticket item here that the fund really doesn't support that much money. So we need to figure out how, and the system development fees probably don't pay a lion's share of that. So we may have to.
And I would also say, they're looking at from the project and what needs to be done, and we'll be looking at it from how to pay for it. We show it now and just in the CIP, just directly funded, but if it's a big enough number, it might make sense for us to finance it rather than strap the CIP money for a project like this.
When are those bonds paid off?
The existing bonds are paid off in 2026.
So we could effectively then have something where we extend, create a new bond and extend that tax out further than that? Or what happens to the tax associated with the revenue that comes in to pay off the bond, the service of debt? After 2026.
So the primary revenue to not only service the debt, but to pay for all our operating expenses and our maintenance capital expenses are our rates, fees, and charges, or your monthly sewer bill, essentially. Mm-hmm. If that's not enough, that's where the general fund transfer comes into play. So depending upon, in a perfect world, if the bonds were paid off in 2026 and that collected debt service, I think it's roughly $1.7 million a year, went away and we didn't have any additional major new operating expenses, then we could look at doing something with the rates. But again, this is...
No, I'm saying transfer them and use them to pay off the new bond.
Well, that's ultimately what would pay off the existing bonds and new bonds. The same revenue source would pay that off as well. So that's why we're proposing to continue that 5% rate increase, because we may have a need to either cash fund, which is probably not likely because of the order of magnitude of these expenses, or, as the manager said, issue new debt and use that revenue source, the monthly service fee, to be the collateral for that particular debt.
Okay, what you're saying, though, is are there any property taxes that go against this?
No.
Okay, it's only the water fees and the tap and the sewer. I was talking about the sewer.
Correct.
And sewer fees, okay.
And to the broken record, but the extent that those cannot support the operation, that's where the general fund transfer comes into.
Right, which is a small portion of the total cost every year of running the operation.
getting smaller every year, hopefully.
And smaller every year. But it might go up after the $20 million Reg 85, is it? Or what is it? Requirements? Okay.
And all these projects that we have out in the out year, they're all defined in our master plan. So if I don't want to go into details, but we have a master plan that kind of defines what we need to do and what the estimates are. So it's big tickets, but we'll evaluate each one as we decide to implement them.
So given what I just heard, we're reducing the rate increase, the projected future rate increase for water to 2.5% annually. We're keeping sewer at 5%. Given, like you said, the order of magnitude of these enhancements or modifications, should we be reducing the water rate?
We look at, and as a clarification on the water rate, we drop that from 5% annually to 2.5% the next 2 years, and then zeroing it out. As it relates to maybe keep that water rate up to help the sewer operation, we try to look at these businesses operationally and financially as separate standalone businesses, and the revenues derived from the water the revenues we charge our water customers should be used really only to support that particular water operation and not the sewer operation.
Yeah. Well, I was confused because Rita said water and sewer, and
Yeah, I
so,
first said
yeah.
water, but then I said added sewer. for
Right,
the
right.
sewer. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's laudable, and I'm certainly in favor of reducing the water rate increase down to 2.5%. But when we have some major enhancements or repairs or whatever to do of this size, so I get it.
Well, and the future growth may help to lessen the amount that needs to be financed
You
in the
mean
future.
the Superior Town Center?
Whatever growth we have.
Yeah, so growth in households?
And
in
commercial.
business and
Commercial is
commercial?
bigger.
Okay,
or
yeah.
has a bigger impact.
Just to back up, the 20 million you're estimating to re-permit or whatever, that's the worst case you think of what they'd ask of us?
And it's also 2025, we're talking about 2022, 2025. So we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. And, I hate to, there's a lot of problems in auditing and financial management when you start selling or planning for future capacity when you don't know what it is that you're supposed to be paying for, what you're going to have. I don't like to buy something and then it's I know we're not buying anything, we're not building anything, but if we're saying we're going to start increasing some fee for something that might happen 10 years from now that we haven't really firmed up yet, I wouldn't be in favor of doing that. So
Heck, I'm not worried about 20 million. I'm worried about, I guess it is in the 2021 budget.
Right. It's out there quite a ways.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, so when we get our permit this year, we're going to have a compliance schedule. They're going to say, here's our regulations, you don't meet them, how are you going to get to that? And you have till 2022 to do it. So we don't have that schedule yet, and we're just anticipating what we know about the plant. But we'll know at the end of this year. Next year.
Sooner rather than later.
So when we get that permit, we'll know how long do we have and when do we have to start implementing these things.
Right, and then as we know, I think we talked about this at one of our board meetings when we first heard about the Reg 85 potential requirements for us and then you can always negotiate or get some kind of a compliance plan that meets the needs and the financial abilities of the town. I mean, it's not that they're going to say, the federal government's going to come in and say, shut it down, shut down the town. But that doesn't mean we should not think about it. I think it's absolutely wonderful that you've got the planning in there, and you're thinking about it in advance. But it's not like a next year thing. We need to put it in the context of the time frame that's required.
We've already started with some improvements last year with the secondary clarifier improvements that we did, which was kind of credit towards our Reg 85 stuff. So the state looks fondly upon that we're working on it. And so, we can get variances here and there. We might get extensions because we are working with them. So I think we'll be fine there.
So your boss is really good at getting all kinds of accolades and awards, so get one here, too. You guys got to work together to get all these awards. So.
Well, and I need to note a couple items there specific to what Mr. Widener was talking about. Those upgrades that we got, Jim was able to secure $500,000 in grant revenue, essentially paying for that entire project. So, accolades to Jim, but also recognition. They're limited, but there are some additional funding opportunities that they always look at. And then I just want to make sure, probably more for our listening audience and everything else. We had talked about these 5% rate increases, and we need, again, one more time to remember, this fund is not self-sufficient. It's being supported by the general fund. Those 5% rate increases aren't going into some pool of cash just sitting there, hoping for future expenses. They're just recognizing that we have an operation right now that's not financially self-sufficient and may have some demands, 5 to 7 years down the road.
Paul, we have this same discussion every single year. For 6 years, we've had this discussion about 5% increases or whatever it might be every other year and so forth. At one point, we did a comparison of our water rates to other communities. And didn't we find that we're on the lower end, or no?
We do that every year.
Midway?
Jeff and I did update that this year. We will provide that information to you. Depending upon where you are consumption-wise, water consumption has a big factor to do with it. But we have seen with our neighboring communities that their increases have gone up materially more than ours. So we are, generally in the middle and sometimes on the lower end. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not advocating that just because our rates might be lower than other communities that we need to increase them. I'm just saying that the system is not self-sufficient. So we've been lower for a long time because of the financial stability of this town. But I do agree that certain departments need to be able to pay for themselves, and water is one of them. So I have no issues with this right now.
Okay, any other questions on the sewer operation then? Then we'll get into our last, operation, which we call storm drainage. And again, from an operational perspective, this is funded by the monthly storm drainage user fees for both our residents and commercial clients. And again, we're breaking out the existing fees on line 11 and then the fees associated with new growth. On the expenditure side, Alex, any items you really need to highlight here?
On the operating expenses, they're pretty well stable. No increases are requested. We have engineering. We belong to KICP and so forth. So those are our normal operations, and no increases are expected in this particular budget.
On the admin side, and then Alex, when you get into the repair side, just want to note for the board line 47, you'll see the repairs and maintenance, which was a relatively material item for this relatively small budget, has gone away, but those expenses actually have transferred over to the capital program. And once we get there, Alex will explain that. And then down to non-departmental, again, it's predominantly the storm drainage's share of that outstanding debt, plus the admin fee that we spoke about a meeting or two ago. And again, the same reserve requirement in this operation of 75 to 100% of expenses in the bank, and that's what line 80 represents, is the figure which we get to here. On storm capital, the first revenue item, I'll talk the third time about, and I'm bored you to death with this, but this represents the TAP fees or system development fees where the new growth will pay into this particular fund. And then I think Alex A. and Alex G. and Dave Heinrich worked on some grant revenue following the September 2013 flood, and then improvements we did to the Coal Creek Channel improvements.
We had estimated this was the grant we had gotten from the state. We didn't quite expend all of that, so that's the current estimate of what we're going to get back from FEMA and the state for that project, completing Coal Creek flood mitigation project.
And that's an offset then to this capital project here, down here.
For capital items, we really don't have major projects scheduled, other than I think you'll see Parks 1 and Parks 2. There's a drainage component of that. And in fact, I was just talking with Alex Gorsevsky today about applying for urban drainage funds for that. But the match, I guess it's a policy decision whether it comes out of here or out of open space funds. So we may have some money left over from the flood mitigation project we did to transfer to that project. But I haven't budgeted in here any funds to match urban drainage for, between McCaslin and US 36. I haven't budgeted funds here, but we could get some urban drainage funds for that.
So I find you have a new park name there, Circle Park? That's a good name for a park. Is that supposed to be Purple Park? Or
this is Circle Park. No, this is down.
Is there a Circle Park?
Yes.
Oh, where is that?
It's in the circle.
It's in the roundabout.
It's round.
It's by,
It's round.
Eldorado Drive goes
Yeah,
around.
right.
Oh, okay.
There's some drainage issues that we've been working to build. This would build a berm and protect some neighbors that periodically get flooded, and we have a design for that, and hopefully we'll get that done next year. A minor project for the manhole steps replacement. Here's the big ticket item that we've want to institute. We have 22 ponds, storm drainage ponds around town, and we want to start a program of regular maintenance of those ponds, hauling sediment out, improving them. So we've this year we're developing a master plan with urban drainage. Urban drainage maintains some of them, but most of them are the town's maintenance. So we want to inventory them all, figure out what we need to do, and then develop a program of ongoing maintenance of those ponds. And that aeration that you had talked about, that could be one item of the problems with some of the ponds that have aeration problems, algae growth, that we can make some improvements. So that's the new program that we're projecting over the next 5 years.
So that takes us through these utility budgets, which is the end of the formal budget presentation. As some follow-up for the board, we hopefully noted all the questions that you had from the prior two meetings as well as this meeting. We will summarize those items and get those follow-up items back to you here relatively soon. I think right now we had tentatively scheduled a follow-up next Monday for some discussion. I'm not sure if we're going to need that, but maybe after we get the follow-up out to the board. If we need to have any dialogue on any remaining budget items, we can potentially have that for a planning session next Monday, but then the formal budget adoption currently is planned for that first meeting in October.
Can I ask a question about the town hall addition? I want to ask to Sergeant Chamberlain, if I can. Is that okay? Yeah. Jim, can I ask you a question about the town hall addition? Sure. There was, not in just the last meeting, the community meeting we had, but we've heard it several times, and it was news to me. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but there's residents that have said that the sheriff's department, the substation, should not be in the town hall, and I was almost under the impression that this is kind of the same recommendation that the sheriff's department has as well. Traffic, a lot of traffic in. I know there wouldn't be any detainees there or anything like that, but what are your thoughts on the depot being in the town hall?
I think it makes sense. I make numerous trips to town hall daily, whether it's dropping out paperwork or relaying stuff to Shannon, the court clerk. It makes it it makes it easier for us if we're working in the same building with the people we work in. The court side of here, we're in a completely different building. We don't have to do as much transferring of paperwork. For meetings, it's easier. It's getting to know the people who work in the town better, and we have more of a chance to see people. There's a lot of times I come into town hall and I'll stop and people will talk to me in the parking lot.
Yeah.
They don't come by the office normally to talk to me.
Right.
But when they run into us, they stop and talk to us. So I think it's actually better for the people in the town to actually see us more often than hidden off in a corner
Okay.
where we can't be safe.
And how many total patrol cars do you have dedicated to Superior and parking them around the town hall if it were in the town hall? Would
So
that-
I have 1, 2, 3, a total of 5 cars that report that are parked over at our substation.
And
Normally, 2 of those are on duty at any given time.
So of the 5, there could be 2 of those 5 that are out patrolling around.
Mhm.
And then after, say, 9 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning, how much traffic is coming in and out?
You know, we did a study when we first talked about this. So talking to the guys who work night shift, out of the 3 people that are working night shift, they said they maybe do 3, maybe 4 trips most back and forth from the substation, and that counts their coming in service at the
Mhm.
beginning of watch, and they're going home at the end of watch. We
Have-
don't spend much time at the substation. Most of our time is on the road patrolling.
Yep. And how many times in your experience within the town of Superior has a deputy turned on his siren when he's leaving the substation?
Maybe a handful of times if they're there for some reason and an emergency call comes out. We don't run emergency to every call. Most calls
Right.
we don't run emergency to. And most of the time, especially at night, sound travels.
Yeah.
So if we're going to a call that is a burglary in progress, we may turn on lights, but we're probably not turning on sirens because everybody can hear the siren coming from a long ways away, including the bad guy.
Yeah. So you wouldn't necessarily, you could refrain from, if the town hall were back here, could you refrain from having the sirens turned on when they're exiting the parking lot and wait until you get on
And-
McCaslin?
And like I said, in the 5 to 6 years I've been here, maybe a handful of times have we actually left a substation with lights and sirens.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Good. Thanks.
Another comment that's come up is about bad guys potentially doing harm to, or focusing harm on the sheriff's office, wherever that may be. And I think you'd made a comment about how the design of the marketplace was not ideal because you've got a glass wall and you've got employees right on the other side of that glass wall. Just by virtue of being at town center or town hall, if it were here, the design would be such that you wouldn't necessarily be at the front window. I think that was the point you were making.
Right, and
was-
really, it's not just any a police department, it's any public entity. The court,
Right.
any public entity, court, town hall staff, anybody is subject to
Subject to
workplace
bad.
violence or
Yeah,
violence. It
right.
can happen. It's just, you try to minimize those risks.
Right.
What's your choice? Substation here or substation over at town center?
Substation where the town hall is.
Okay, good.
Folks, we've got to have Sergeant Chamberlain say all this in a regularly scheduled town board meeting
Absolutely. On Monday.
because we know not many residents listen to the budget meeting, so let's
Anytime you want me to come to a meeting,
Yeah.
I'll be there.
let's repeat it.
Monday would be good.
Well,
Well, I think, whenever, what our next step is,
Yeah.
the next
Yes.
meeting to
He
talk
needs to be
about
there.
this specifically.
Right.
Which I think we owe, and we're all in agreement, we owe residents a next step meeting
Right.
to talk about town hall. And then that definitely, we should have some facts and data presentations,
Right.
one of them being this.
right. Matt, at one point, and I don't know if you were just sort of brainstorming there, are we going to have that follow-up second meeting in September?
So I think Sergeant Chamberlain was at a board meeting and stated all this when we had a presentation. Paul will get the date and I'll email it out to the board.
Yeah.
So you can look at it. I have it on the October 10th retreat meeting. I wasn't planning on bringing it back to the board anytime soon.
Bringing what back?
The town hall discussion. I mean, we've got an election in
Yeah.
November, so no decision's going to be made this year anyways. So.
But we're still going to do a couple more community meetings. I think we should do one at Superior
Right.
Elementary and maybe one at El Dorado.
Yeah, I'd like direction from the new board, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, you can get direction from the board, and we should individually think and then collectively make that recommendation.
Is there time in either of the September meetings for, I guess at a minimum, a debrief? I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from the board, and I think it is
Maybe
important.
do it at the work session on the 12th. The 26th, there's 2 board members that are gone, so I don't want to do
It's
it.
probably
with-
just one.
Oh.
I'm
okay.
probably going to be here.
Okay. So, but, so that was my thought about not having it on the 26th.
I agree with the sentiment. It needs to be sooner rather than later. I mean, that was a well-attended meeting.
Yeah.
People are expecting follow-up. And frankly, I'm okay with it just as part of the reports process at the next meeting.
Or it should be on the agenda.
Although it should be, yeah, I
It-
agree.
it should
In
be
enough of
agenda.
an advance, not Monday night. It can't be Monday
Yeah.
night, because that's too soon.
But I think this board can make the decision, though, to do a
The
couple more
next
community
steps.
meetings, though.
Mhm.
Yes.
I am certain, 100% certain, that the new board members that come on here in November will want to have the same process. So I think that we can start scheduling that.
Yeah.
And let residents know and plan around that. So if we can do that, set up one, maybe it's not till November that we get to do it, but if we can start getting that process going, I think that'd be great. I'd like to see town hall here.
Yeah.
And I think the sooner that we get that going and we get residents on board and really answer all their questions, the sooner we can make that happen. I mean, again, through this process, we might find, though, that it's better over there or it's better somewhere else.
Right.
But if we wait till next year, I think we're
To
like 2
continue
years
the
out.
process.
We just
can't
need to- we
wait
need to
till next year
continue- we need to continue the
So
dialogue.
Chris, here's the
Yeah.
thing, is you're probably going to be the one missing the September 26th meeting.
No, he's here.
He's not, who's
Elia is
missing it?
the one that
Elia.
said he was, you and Elia
So
were
we,
the two.
yeah, and I'm going to be here at that meeting now. I'm changing my plans. So I guess we need to ask Elia if he minds missing that conversation, because I think it needs to be sooner rather than later.
And I think that what we're saying, what I'm hearing that we're
Mhm.
saying is, we need, as the mayor said, a kind of, or whoever
Right.
said
Debrief.
debrief, and provide answers to the questions that were asked, because there are answers to those questions.
Right.
And we should provide those answers. And then the next, so it's more of a debriefing, providing answers to questions that have been asked. And then the next public meeting would be, okay, now let's talk about where we go from here. Here's
Right.
all the information
But I think
have
we need to
available.
discuss next steps
Mhm.
at the debriefing.
Right.
So we're clear on the next steps.
I
So
agree
the
with
other
that.
factor for me was I'm not going to be here on the 26th. I'm out of town.
Okay.
I just worked, and so Martin's covering the meeting. So that was the other reason for having it on the 10th. But if you want to have it on the 26th, we can, if Eli's okay with that.
I think it is important to continue the dialogue. I mean, if we have a community meeting and then we go for a month without saying a word other than some snippets in update, in board member updates, I don't think that's sufficient. I think that we need to have a fuller discussion, answer some of the questions, because a lot of the questions and a lot of questions that have been raised before are being continuing to be raised, and so we need to just revisit those answers. People may not agree with them, and but then after that, then
So are
then
you
next steps.
suggesting the 26th as the
Yes.
appropriate time?
Yes.
Okay, I agree with that.
Yes, and no, there are no decisions coming then. It's just
Right.
merely continuing the conversation. It's follow up, review some key points that Chris took real good notes, and it's review key points that were discussed, that were brought up, and raise new ideas that were brought up, and then future meetings could talk about more public engagement and keeping the process
Speaking
going.
of Chris Drapinski, are we getting a summary of the note sheet?
Yes, we haven't received it yet, but yes.
Okay.
I meant Chris
And
Hansen.
this Chris, our
Yeah,
Chris
I-
Hansen.
every single resident's question is, I wrote down, so
Right.
with their
Mhm.
name, so I guess I can type that out and send that to
Right.
the board.
Well, yes, that would, but I think
Chris
we need
Drapinski's
to,
got them as well.
somebody, it's a couple people from here, from the board, along with staff, need to identify all the questions that need an answer. I mean, that ask about facts and data, the costs, the efficiencies, the location, all the things that deserve an answer with a considered, analyzed, analytical answer. Not the ones that say, oh, you promised. Okay, well, we have to get off the emotional side for a moment, and let's just deal with facts on this debriefing. And then we'll get into the next community meeting, and then we can have, again, this platform being facts and data, and then start talking about the emotions of it and what people perceive were what were promised, and then talk that through and try and move down to some kind of a joint, or, and I never use word, well, we just have to come up with a considered decision. We're never going to get consensus. Politics doesn't work that way. You can't get consensus, and that's a bad word, but in my mind. But we can get down to a point of deciding what we're going to do next. And where,
And key to
'cause that's the
that,
question.
I know I'm repeating myself, but key to that is having the numbers for the other choices.
So by the 26th, do you think we could have some follow-up answers to, like, those costs, for instance? And I think that shouldn't be more difficult than just square footage times construction costs.
Right.
I mean, that's what
For like,
Property costs.
yeah, there's property costs on Richmond 15, there's infrastructure costs, so, yeah, we'll see what we can get put
Okay.
together.
But there's some good points about, well, what if we sold this property and the property back here to offset those costs? What is that difference? I think that's all stuff we should be considering.
And we can use, it'll have to be swags, but
Swag?
consider, silly wild ass guess, but as a swag in my technical financial.
I didn't use the word silly.
Silly wild ass guess. But guesstimates are estimates. You're going to have to come up with something that's a range kind of a thing, and that's appropriate. It's not that we're trying to get down to,
Yes.
which whether one is $500,000, $253,690 versus the other one. We just have to get we got to be in a ballpark, not necessarily in a
There's a
seat.
misconception that if we sold this property, moved over there,
Yes,
that we could
that we'd be
pay the
washed.
delta.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
it could be, but I'm not.
It could be,
big-
but that's a belief right now, and we need to bring the facts in to
Well,
discuss it.
one big thing in my mind for that discussion is time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not as simple as the dollars. There's also the time factor. I mean, doing something at Town Center is probably 4 to 5 years. I mean, realistically, if the decision was made to move over there, it's 4 to 5 years. We've got issues today that if we decided to add on, we're still 1.5 to 2 years out of solving our problem that was introduced to us almost a year ago. So it's,
10 years ago.
the bigger question is, are we okay pushing that time frame out that far? I don't know that is realistic given.
Yeah.
given
Well,
what
you
we-
bring up a good point, and I'm assuming Paul probably was already planning on this, but other considerations besides the financial.
Yeah.
For example, timing. For example, Richmond 15, which we hadn't even raised, opportunity costs, because if that's used for this, it wouldn't be used for something else, that kind of thing.
That's what I call trade-off, because
Right.
if we do a town hall in town center, there's a trade-off involved too.
That's right.
Particularly if we sell this to offset that cost, then we lost the potential use in town center of a library community building.
Well, and I think one of the things that people really value in a town center, one of the things people really value in a town hall is the easy in-out ability. When you're talking about town center, that's a parking structure and may not be as easy in and out. I mean, think downtown Boulder. And so when talking about other factors, there's the time, but there's the convenience factor. I really appreciate being able to drive in here at 5 minutes to 9 and park, and boom, I'm in here and I look, and we're here on time. And I don't think that same condition would exist over there.
All those things need to be part, because that is, you can analyze those, and you may not be able to quantify them for a dollar amount, but you can definitely.
Yes.
They're quantitative, not just qualitative in many respects.
Yes. Okay.
And we need to do that in a formal, organized
Yes.
way,
So
rather
all
than
of-
just
yes.
giving answers like this. This
Yes.
is what got us to this point, because town hall expansion has been discussed many meetings. I was at them as a resident, and I've been at them as a planning commissioner, and now as a board member for 2 years. This has been discussed many, many times, but not in what people would recognize as a formal recognized, agenda-driven process. So let's now do that. Let's start with, here's the case, here's the, not the case, here's the data about what exists, what could exist, what potential options might be, and then let's get together and say, now, where do we want to go from here for the town? And then instead of making an assumption and a leap that we've already decided something, which we haven't. We haven't decided yet as a board.
But I think it is key that we continue this at the September meeting, because as we let these big chunks of time go in between, it kind of gets off people's radar, and then it zooms back onto their radar, and there's this kind of lurching effect, and it doesn't feel as good to people. I think people want kind of continuity in the discussion.
I think also, if you announce at the next meeting
Yes,
that this
that's
is coming
coming.
up on the 26th,
Yes.
then we bridge the gap there.
And
Yes.
no decisions on the 26th. It's here's
Correct.
the information. It'll be out there, and it'll be available for everybody to either come in here and comment on and/or listen to afterwards. And then there'll be enough time before we have the next meeting where you can come now and be part of the discussion.
So are we doing it are you going to schedule it as a work session? How are you going to schedule that?
I
on
don't
the
know, I have to
26th?
look. I have to look at the
Okay.
schedule.
Okay. Okay, anything else? All right, thank you for good budget meetings, and we're adjourned.
By the way, Paul, I love this book.
Jim?
This is the best book, the budget book.